Hey everybody, welcome to Wands and Daggers. I'm David, this is my good friend Dan, and today we're going to be talking about multiple threat encounters that you can run in Dungeons & Dragons. Multi-threat encounters are an awesome way for your game to have a couple of different things going on, so the fight feels a little bit more intense, and it feels like even if you solve this problem, there's another thing going on. And it's especially a great way to make each player feel like they're valuable, because you have one player dealing with one threat and another player on the other side of the room dealing with an additional threat. And so a lot of the times, instead of just feeling like you're just one of the 5 people who killed an enemy, you had a purpose.
That seems pretty interesting. What would something like that look like?
So, number one example off the top of my head is perhaps the players have been sent to this tower, and there's this ritual they need to do at the top of this tower to, banish some curse or whatever. It's really important. So the players get to the tower, and they climb to the top of the tower, and the wizard of the party starts conducting this ritual, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of goblins show up, but they're at the base of the tower. And the players start to realize pretty quickly these goblins have no intention of climbing the tower to fight them. They have a bunch of bombs they're setting up. And if you don't stop the goblins, they're just going to blow up the tower and the whole thing will collapse. Well, the wizard has already started the incantation, right? It's important that he finishes it. If he doesn't do it now, the opportunity is lost. They're not going to get another shot. The wizard has to stay here and finish this ritual. But somebody has to go down to the bottom of the tower and fight off the goblins. This is a great situation because instead of just telling the players, hey, it's about time you split up the party, you're not forcing them to do anything. You're just putting them in a situation where it's obvious that's their only solution to the problem. So now maybe they send the barbarian and the cleric down the stairs to go deal with the goblins, and maybe the bard stays at the top of the tower to keep the wizard company. And so now they're at the bottom of the tower fighting off the goblins. Well then, of course, you got to have like a wyvern flying up above to disrupt so that there's a fight going on at the same time. So now the wizard is trying to, maintain the ritual while defending himself, with the bard trying to fend off a wyvern, while the cleric and the barbarian are at the bottom of the tower trying to fight off a horde of goblins. And if they succeed, maybe they'll come back up to the top of the tower. And at the end of the fight, no matter who you were, you know that you were essential to making that plan successful because everybody was doing something really important.
So the example you gave is pretty combat heavy, but I mean, there are other kinds of encounters. Do you have anything that maybe not so combat heavy?
Absolutely. So one thing that would be really cool is I envision maybe the players are working for a noble. They have a really good relationship with this noble, and this noble invites them to a party. And then the noble wants to specifically talk to the rogue because the rogue had snuck into this area, found out a bunch of information, and the noble wants to talk in private. So the noble and the rogue go off to a side room in this large manor while the rest of them stay in the party. And then maybe at that point, there's another attack, right, by, some orcs that bust in and start, but it's too many of them. There's just a whole horde of them, and you can't survive, right? And so at this point, right, the players who are in the main room with all the partiers, it's really just an escape scene where they're fleeing through the manor trying to get out, where the noble and the rogue are in another part of the manor, and they have to escape through another part. And so maybe for the majority of the players, their encounter is kind of how many of these fellow nobles can we save? Or maybe if you're an evil player, you don't care about saving them, you just want to get away with your life. Maybe you're looting as you flee from the manor, but it's not a combat, you're just trying to escape from the manor. But maybe in this farther off other side of the manor with the rogue and the noble, there's an orc that's blocking your path, but it's just one stray orc who's straight out from the main assault, and so he actually has to fight through it, so you can mix it up differently in that way. You could also do another encounter where maybe the players have found someone that had a bunch of information that they needed. It was an enemy that they had tracked down to his lair, and they find him in his lair, and they go to fight him, but he has no desire to fight them. But he won't tell them what he wants to know. So the players are trying to interrogate him, but as they're trying to interrogate him, he flicks a switch, and the whole lair starts collapsing on top of them. But there's no way out. The doors are already locked. There's no way to escape. And so then maybe some of the other players have to try and figure out the puzzle of the room. There's a bunch of objects in the room that if they can figure out the puzzle, they can stop the room from collapsing. But the person they came for, their target, is already dying. And so someone has to interrogate him and try and get the information they need, while the rest of them have to try and figure their way out. So there's like a lot of different ways you can do that, and each way has a new opportunity to focus on a new skill set, right? So if you're trying to interrogate somebody before time runs out, you want the person who has the really good charisma skills for that particular encounter is going to be the focus character, while the other characters are off doing something else.
Those are some pretty good examples. When you're planning something like this, what kind of things do you have to take into account? Like what player information and that kind of and story information?
Number one thing is you want to be thinking about which players you're going to be the highlighted for different roles. And it's fine if the players come up with a different way of solving the scenario than you intended, but you just want to avoid having your multi-threat encounters always have the most exciting threat be the same player, right? So if you have one character who, for instance, is got really good charisma, you don't want every single multi-threat encounter you throw at them to be something that can only be solved by the charisma character. So every fight turns into they're the main character and all the other characters are defending them while they do the important thing. So you want to have a variety of different things that are important. So each player at some point felt like I was the person who that encounter rested on their shoulders. One final thought, one of my favorite things about the multi-threat encounter is that you can have situations where you open up a player for a much more dramatic moment. If the whole party is trapped in a room with a really powerful enemy who they might not be able to beat, but they have the opportunity to flood the whole room with lava, they're not going to do it. But if one player finds themselves off by themselves with a really powerful enemy, and they have the option to flee, but they also have the option to flood the room with lava and kill themselves and the really powerful enemy, you've given the player an opportunity for one of those dramatic sacrifice themselves to save the whole party situations. I feel like those situations don't always come up organically when you run a normal encounter, because you've always got the whole party there, and they're always trying to save you, and there's never any like a clear situation where it's like, yes, it's this person has the opportunity to sacrifice their life. It's always like, well, you could, but we could also try and save you, and it's never a clear line. And I feel like if you are going to die to save your party, you want that feeling of there was no other option, there was no other choice here. I did what I had to do, and you don't necessarily always want it to be like, well, we were all fighting this guy, and I died during the fight. Well, you could have lived if we just made some better decisions. You don't want that in that hero scenario. Well, that's been our video on multi-threat encounters. I've been David, this has been Dan. We are Wands and Daggers, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next.